Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ash here coming at you today in Clash Royale. Today's a special video for you guys. I'm joined by three former guests here on the channel. Three semi-pro / top players inside the game. Welcome to the channel. We're doing the Broken Podcast back to the channel. It feels good. Welcome back, Jax. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, Ash. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic, dude. I can't wait to hear your opinions on balance changes and your buff and nerf ideas. We also have Rob. Rob, what's up, man?
I'm doing great. I can't wait until the balance changes, man.
Me too, dude. It feels like it's been 3 years. So happy to have you back. It feels like every time that you're on my channel, I don't know if you're just the best player in the world, Rob, or if you're just play very well under pressure, but I feel like you slay every time that we have you on. So interesting to have you on in a non-playing format, rather just giving your opinions on the game. So happy to have you. And then we have SK. SK, what's up, man?
I've been a bit up and down, but I'm doing pretty great overall, Ash. How about you?
I am also doing pretty great, man. I can't complain. I mean, I can complain about the game a little bit, but not about life, so that's good, right? All right, dude. Well, happy to have you on. All three of you? No, Jax, you've been on one of these before, right?
Yes, I think I was on one with Shane and Cash.
Indeed. Yeah, this is like the well, you're a content creator, so yeah, you guys either do streaming or whatever in the past. But anyway, today I want to start out by a little bit different than the Broken format. You guys, my viewers, are familiar with the format where we both give our best ideas for one card we'd love to see buffed or one card we're dying to see nerfed in the game. But before we do that, I want to talk about these balance changes. Now, I mentioned, months ago that I hated these, the end of these monthly balance changes. I have no idea how my guests, these kind of semi-pro / pro / top ladder players, I'm just going to call you guys pros for the rest of the video and stop repeating the same three things. But I'm curious to hear your guys' opinion because in my opinion, and I'm biased as a content creator, I hate it. I hate the end of balance changes on a monthly basis. It feels so stale, the meta. Like, I don't know about you guys. Very curious. I want to kind of run through it here, but just to give my best case, at least we had a nice cadence to every new season. There was cards that we get to test out, decks that we need to make substitutions on. Granted, I do realize and recognize that that's annoying for some players, especially free-to-play players that, work hard to level up some cards. But at the end of the day, I just feel like now it's the same old, every day, every week, every month. Doesn't feel like there's many changes at all inside the game. There's cards that desperately need buffs and nerfs. Like, that should be first and foremost, right? There's a lot of cards that need adjustments in the game. So that's my case. Especially as a content creator, it sucks because, like, I don't do the Broken Podcast anymore. There's no reason to. There's no balance changes. Anyway, I will end my rant and ramble. Jax, tell me why I am either terribly wrong or why I'm right here on the balance changes. What do you think, man?
I agree with you, man. It was always fun. Like, I'm not as avid of a content creator as you are with daily uploads, but yeah, it was always fun, just having that season reset and saying, oh, these new cards are buffed. I wonder how I can make new decks with them. I wonder what kind of new decks will pop up in the meta. And yeah, it was just really enjoyable to be experimenting with these new cards, experimenting with the new interactions. And it's definitely gotten pretty stale facing the same, 4 or 5 decks on ladder over the past few months, for sure.
Yeah, it feels like every, it's weird because it feels like every win condition. Do you agree that like every win condition, for the most part, I guess there's a couple that aren't viable, but like everything's kind of viable, but everything's so repetitive at the same time. Like you see a win condition and like 80% chance you can guess the deck.
Exactly, yeah. It's just like there are a few win conditions I almost never see, and then a few that are like occasional play against, and those are the most refreshing games. And then you have the win conditions that are just always in the meta, like the same decks over and over. And it's like, oh, I see this, and now I know the deck, and I'm gonna have to play that deck another 100 times before it gets changed. So.
Yeah. You're just like, okay, months and months and months of this, I guess. Rob, what about you, man? Like, do you feel like it was a mistake? Do you like? I think they said it saves dev time or something by not doing balance changes, but good God, it feels like an awful decision. What do you think, man?
Honestly, I don't want to be too cynical. Like, I like the game. This is my favorite game. I only play Clash Royale, but that was a really bad decision. The game was already falling off in popularity, and as a competitive player, it doesn't seem right that the same decks have been meta for like, I don't know, 6 months now. Because even when they were balanced, it was just like small balances, small changes to the deck, small changes to the predominant archetypes in competitive at least. So that's what I've noticed, that especially top ladder competitive, the really try hard portions of the game are just really stale right now. And that's most notable, as I said, on really top ladder competitive.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you, and it's weird. Like I used to do like even these top, whatever 3-5 decks every season based on win percentage, and it's been like the same exact decks for the most part. It's just like, okay, well, there's one card changed in this deck, boys and girls. That's pretty cool. SK, what about you, man? Like, do you disagree with us? Are you the contrarian here, or do you agree?
I feel like there are almost no contrarians when it comes to this topic, Ash, but honestly, I feel like what you said about the more dev time or anything, I just think that overall, it just makes the game a lot more stale. Like, I agree with all of your guys' points, and I feel like we just, even though the monthly balance changes were not very well received quite a few times, like, people hated on Seth all the time.
Mhm.
Personally, this might be a contrarian opinion, but I think Seth's balance changes were honestly not that bad for the game as a whole. Because I feel like at least having monthly balances that had reasoning and thought behind them kept the game fresh, kept new cards in the meta, took boring, overpowered cards out of the meta, and it was just always dynamic, even if the game itself was broken. But now we just have kind of a very stale, repetitive format in the game, and I feel like it's not only the win conditions, but also the support cards. Like you see Spear Goblins, you see Log, you see Bats, you see Fisherman, Hunter, all of these cards in so many different archetypes, just always constantly overpowering other and oppressing other worse options in the game, which is just killing cards like the Musketeer, the Witch, the Wizard, because why would you use those if you just have Hunter that can do everything? And I just ultimately feel like, again, the question comes back to, if there's so much dev time being saved, where is it going into? Because it kind of builds up a lot of expectations for this upcoming update. And I still have hope, but I would just feel really sad and upset if this next huge update, which has a huge content update and balance changes, is just kind of the same as it has been for a while.
Yeah, it does feel like, great points, SK. I feel like there's a lot riding on the next update, to say the least, right? I mean, coming off of the year that was in 2020 in Clan Wars 2 and kind of the debacle that was, not to be so cynical this whole video, I feel like I'm super negative, but I feel like it's also fair to say there's a lot riding on this. And yeah, guys, and we all agree. Ultimately, it's definitely lends to like a stale. And I did want to touch on one thing that you mentioned, SK, about Seth. Like, do you guys, Jackson, Rob, do you think that Seth did a good job? Before I give my opinion.
We can definitely say that Seth was always a little bit on the more extreme end of the balance changes. You remember the Witch rework with like 220% plus damage. But yeah, his balance changes definitely did a good job shaking things up. Like, however much you may disagree with some of the changes that he made, the metas were never stale. Like, I remember when the E-Golem Witch meta was happening, people would be putting rockets in random decks just so that they could counter the Executioner and the E-Golems and stuff. And it was definitely really fun just to have that much variation from month to month. It was really like you don't know how much you appreciated it until you're missing it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's so true. It's like, it was so easy to complain about that stuff, and then it's like, yeah, it was kind of fun when they had to emergency nerf Executioner because he was one-shotting everything inside the entire arena, Rob, do you kind of agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, I actually wholeheartedly agree with that. I was always critical of Seth, and I think there was always good reason to be, because you can always do a better job, right? But in the end, he actually did balance the game, and sometimes he broke the game, but that's what made the game fun in a lot of cases and retained a lot of players. So yeah, I kind of do miss his balance changes, to be honest.
Yeah, dude, I'm in the same boat with you guys. I was critical on the channel plenty of times, and maybe rightfully so, maybe wrongly so. I certainly probably could not have done a better job. And speaking to that just in general, all you have to do, and I love my subscribers, I love my viewers, is not a shot at anybody, but you can look at my YouTube comments on any of my podcasts and my balance, podcast videos like this. You can look at any Clash Royale balance change tweet, any Reddit post, and all you have to know is you can easily recognize one fact. One indisputable fact is that everybody thinks their ideas for balance changes are amazing, and everybody thinks everybody else's ideas are crap, right? Like, I've never put out balance change ideas ever on this channel. There hasn't been at least few people in the comments being like, "Are you serious, you idiot?" And it doesn't fail. Every single time I look at my comments on any of these videos, there are people who like, why aren't they nerfing the Mega Knight? Why aren't they nerfing the Hog Rider? Basically cards that might not be oppressive, might not be overpowered, but are annoying, you know? And so everybody has different things they're looking for in balance changes. We actually had a chat with Molt about that, like about how he asked for a nerf to like Goblin Barrel and Expo for 3 years because he was annoyed by those cards. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. Just everybody has a different perspective at what they're looking for. So I think that Seth, more so than any of the changes that he made, I think that not the problem at all. It wasn't bad or good, but the fact that he made himself public as the balance guy on Twitter and everywhere else, I think it gave the community an easy target to always, throw whatever,
I remember even after he said he was going to Clash of Clans, some people would still talk about Seth when they complained about a broken card. They'd be like, Seth made this card broken.
Yeah, right.
He's been gone for like a month now.
He's been gone for like a year now, and they're still like, it's Seth's fault. But yeah, anyway, so guys, let's get to the actual balance changes here. Jax, why don't you go first, man? What do you have for a nerf?
So for the nerf, I have Royal Recruits, and a lot of people have been asking for this. I'm looking at their win rates and use rates. They're on the higher end, but they don't appear to be absolutely insane. There's just such an unhealthy and no skill card. And I'm pretty sure I had Recruits in the last deck I shared on the channel, and I was either playing them a lot or I just wasn't playing them at all. And that's like kind of how it goes. You either have the perfect counter to the Recruits and the matchup is free and you just win, or you have no counter to the Recruits and you just lose. And it's really unhealthy. You can cover both lanes, dual lane pressure, outplays, almost drops to 0 when you're facing the card. And I think it's just really unhealthy. And it also is, again, on the higher end of the cards. I think it's 24th win rate in GCs. And I think they just need a nerf because of those reasons.
Okay, Recruit nerf, how would you nerf them?
I would say reverting the last damage buff, because them one-shotting Spear Goblins are just so much damage now that it's like, well, you can shut down both lanes and output a ton of damage. There's not a whole lot of other cards that can do that, and I think definitely reverting that, because they were in a decently healthy spot, I think, before that buff, but then after the buff, they were just going out and doing too much damage, and everybody was using.
Okay. Does anybody? Here's my only concern, Jax. Like, my viewers really want to hear from the only non-expert here on the channel. But like, my only concern is like, I love Royal Delivery, man, and I feel like Royal Delivery, like that would be an unfair nerf to Royal Delivery. So would you be okay with the buff to Royal Delivery as well, or no? To make up for it.
Actually, the Royal Delivery on its own, I think it's just underappreciated because of spells like the Log and Giant Snowball, which just basically do its job, but a little bit better, because it can't cross the bridge. I think if maybe it does deserve a buff so that it's not being outshone like that, but I think on its own, even with that Recruit nerf, I think it'd still be a pretty healthy card. You don't want to do like nuking pushes like it was while knocking them back.
I kind of like the knockback delivery, but maybe that's just me. All right, SK or Rob, you guys agree, disagree with the Recruits nerf?
Personally, I would definitely agree with the Recruits nerf by Jax, mostly also because just the nature of Recruits as a whole. It's kind of just, it doesn't leave you much room to play. It's just, you're up Elixir, you're going to Recruits in the back, and they can't do anything about it. So I think that ultimately Recruits as a whole just need to be addressed, because there isn't much about the way you play the card that can be changed. So I think the only solution is something similar to what Jax said, and I also think that the delivery could use a slight buff, maybe to offset it, but I also completely agree with Jax's sentiment about the delivery being underappreciated, so it shouldn't be overbuffed, because it's still very viable right now by itself.
Okay, fair enough. Rob?
This might be a bit radical, but I think we should, instead of nerfing the card and just buffing it in like 5 months again to just steal the entire meta, maybe just delete the card, because I don't think we have any people who think the Recruits is a healthy choice for the game.
Listen, us noobs like me, we need a card that we can lean on, a dependable, no-skill card that you just plop down.
Yeah, I see the attraction in that. If we don't delete it, maybe just rework it so they can't be in both lanes. That would make the most sense to me. But yeah, if we can't do that, then just nerf the card. To be honest, there's really no great answer.
Okay, fair enough, guys. Jax, what do you have for a buff?
So for the buff, this may be controversial once you start thinking about it a little bit and what this would mean, but I think a buff to the Lumberjack is kind of deserved right now. And nothing crazy, just reverting that 0.1 second damage, or not damage, hit speed nerf that it got a few months ago. I'm pretty sure the reason for that nerf was because Lumberloon Freeze was just absolutely broken. But I was looking back on some games from that meta, and it was just kind of like the meta was really good for Balloon and Lumberjack at that time. And I think the Lumberjack would also provide a little bit of variety, you know, as a alternative to Mini Pekka, Valkyrie, and Knight. And it could also open up the meta a few more, maybe decks, some bridge spam decks, you know, maybe Golem. I know that's not the thing that most people want to hear, but those decks can kind of make a slight comeback and see a little bit more meta variation.
Okay, anybody disagree with the Lumberjack buff?
Well, I don't disagree with it, but I think if we're going to buff the Lumberjack, we have to taper down some of the cards that go well with it, like the cannon card or like the balloon. Those cards are already strong as it is, so we'd probably have to nerf them a little bit if we're going to buff the Lumberjack and just, you know, lead to a more balanced game. But as a whole, the Lumberjack is pretty weak, and I would like to see it get a buff.
Yeah, I do feel like people go Mini Pekka over Lumberjack like 9 times out of 10 now, you know, for that 4 elixir kind of tank stopper card. So I agree with it. I'd be cool with a Lumberjack buff as well. Rob, okay, so it looks like Jax, you got pretty good reviews, for at least from us. We'll wait till my comments tear you apart. You know, my viewers will give it to you. But Rob, what do you got for us, man? What's your nerf?
Yeah, so I'm a man of the people. I went to nerf Lava Hound and Golem first play.
Ooh. Wait. Just the first play?
Yeah, just as like you can't. I want to make it so it's like the Elixir Collector. You can't just play them first play and win the game by starting handing your opponents. That's kind of a ridiculous way to play the game. And you know, to address the counter argument that a lot of Lava Hound and Golem players make, plays like Hog Rider, Minor Wallbreakers first play. Those should also be mitigated. So I kind of just want a revolutionary change in the game, I guess. But playing a win condition first play doesn't really seem like the way that Clash Royale was really intended to be played. And if this makes the game more defensive, then so be it, because it'll, I think, kind of lower the frustration that a lot of players are experiencing right now in the midst of just lava hounding and goleming first play and not being able to do anything about it. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Gotcha. Interesting. What do you guys feel? How do you guys feel about this? I have a hot take on this. Anybody else want to chime in?
I definitely agree. I remember back a few months ago, my best deck, which is Pekka Bridge Spam, was not in the greatest spot. And sometimes if I knew my opponent had a counter, I would just Battle Ram the bridge first play and hope they didn't have anything in hand. I think starting hands and definitely the more expensive win conditions are the most polarizing a way to abuse starting hands. And I definitely agree with the fact that those cards shouldn't be in starting hand. Like, starting hand basically trumps matchup, it trumps skill. It's like the ultimate card, or not the card, but like the ultimate way your opponent can't do anything. And I definitely agree that it should be checked up on, you know.
Interesting. SK?
So I kind of have two different thoughts on this. Firstly, I definitely think that Rob and Jax both have very valid points. I myself, sometimes when I'm really tilted, I go Expo first play and hope that it works. And sometimes it does, sometimes I lose for it. But I think that it is a very bad way to play the game. And I think, so personally, I feel like one potential option, because I think that in some cycle decks, it does make sense to go win condition first play, so that's a very cheap one, like Logbait, Goblin Barrel, or Wall Breakers, even though I hate Wall Breakers. I think it does make sense to kind of see what counters the opponent has. You can like kind of use that information in the future. But it's kind of hard to find a balance between like what is a win condition that can be first played and what can't. So I think that another potential option is to address the underlying issue behind this, which is fixing starting hands as a whole, which would be a whole nother thing to do. But I think that if they work more on fixing starting handing in Clash Royale, this would be less of an issue in the first place, because then people would actually have responses to the win condition first play.
Okay, so how do you fix starting hands?
that's really hard to do, but what I would personally do is just have it so that you can arrange your deck in a way where your starting hand is just the way you arrange the deck. So let's say you want 4 cards out of your deck to be in your starting hand, you just do that, and that's how it works. Because another issue is if you have win conditions not able to be played first, what if you have a deck with more than 4 win conditions? Then are you just not allowed to make a deck with more than 4 win conditions, or what happens when you do? Do you just get one anyway? Then it kind of ruins the point anyway. So
Yeah.
I feel like that would be the easiest way, but you guys can tell me what you think as well.
Well, I'll give like I hate to do this because you guys are all so much smarter than I am, but I don't like it. Like, here's the thing. First of all, you don't see any CRL pros. Like, very seldom, if ever, do people drop a win condition for like. You don't see golems in the back first play in CRL. So is it that big of an issue? Is it that inherently? Because there's a huge risk reward. There's a reward, but there's also a big risk, right? And also, I just don't like. I am probably the only person on Earth, guys, who's against the Elixir Collector not being in starting hand. I think it's dumb. If they want to nerf Elixir Collector, that's cool. Nerf it. But having one card in the entire game that can't be in your starting hand, I just think it's a weird exception type card that I just don't like. You know, so. I think that all cards should play by relatively the same rules, and if you want to balance them, you can balance them. But I like they killed the Lister Collector for the most part, and like, dude, if you want to kill it, just delete it from the game, you know. But like to give it an arbitrary, weird rule that you can't have, like, you can't use a card in its most valuable potential role. To me, it doesn't make a ton of sense. So you guys go ahead and let me have it. Why am I wrong?
I can see both sides, but I actually was talking to some people about this from Royale API, and one of their directors, I think his name is Sean, mentioned, what if you had all 8 cards available to you at the beginning of the game, and then you played them one at a time as you go, and that after you play 4, it sets up your 4-card cycle. Like, you can't play the same card again. And somebody mentioned a few things. I think people that are smarter than me with that kind of stuff could figure out some problems with it, but that solution seemed like the best to me. It seemed like it was the most well-balanced of all the starting hand solutions I heard.
That sounds smart, actually. I might have to piggyback onto that idea. But just to address the point about CRL, I think it's more so the fact that people don't go Golem and Lava Hound first play in CRL. Well, first off, Golem isn't really played in CRL. Like,
True.
It's seldom played because of the meta in CRL. But also, and also that applies to Lava Hound. There's so many Lava Hound counters in the meta, especially in competitive meta. But I mean, that makes it so Lava Hound first play is not really a viable option anyway, or Lava Hound in general. So I think
like, even top Golem ladder players, Rob, like, they don't. I mean, maybe a few do, but most of them don't play Golem first play.
It's actually unfortunately widespread.
Okay, fair enough.
It's like half
I
of
don't want to
Golem
name
players,
call,
I
but I
think.
know a lot of people personally that go Golem first play and just win games like
And you don't
that.
find it
Lava
risky?
first play.
You don't find it risky? I mean, Lava first play is a thing. Like, I agree with that. I would say most Lava players, Lava first play. But Golem, I didn't realize it was that rampant, this issue. But
it's a thing.
Okay,
It's a thing.
Listen, fair enough.
agree.
We will have the viewers chime in on this. Let's keep it moving here and go to, because I think we could talk this one endlessly, the starting play. But I'm curious to hear what our viewers think of the starting hand. Is it a problem? Is there a problem that needs to be addressed? If so, how? Rob, what's your buff, man?
A buff that won't really affect me too much, but a buff that I kind of feel attached to in a way is the Pekka. It's just such a weak card right now in the meta. It doesn't really counter much, and even if you do run Pekka, like Jax, I know has always had issues with the balance changes and how they have negatively affected the Pekka and its strength and popularity. It's one of those cards that it's a win condition in a way, but it doesn't really feel like it, and it feels very circumstantial and when you can actually gain value from it. So it's one of those cards that I think it deserves to be stronger than what it is right now, and that's really the only reason I want to buff it. I think we can talk about these niche cards like Fire Spirits or Bomber that might need a buff, but we should focus on what the majority of people actually do play and what a lot of people would like to play. And that, in my opinion, would be the Pekka, which is not as strong as it should be right now.
Well, I really want to hear from Jax on this one, but I should point out that although, like, I actually agree with you, but just to play contrarian here, Pekka Bridge Spam, just looking at all ladder, not just top ladder, is consistently top 3, if not top 1, like, win rates. So granted, it's that only deck that you see Pekka in, but you know, aside from like the Anaban deck, I guess. But like, it is kind of noteworthy that it still kind of does well. Jax, like, how do you feel about it, man? You play Pekka Bridge Spam.
So it's kind of hard to talk about the Pekka. Just to like go blunt right here, I don't think it needs a buff at all. There's only one buff I would even like say, okay, that's actually you can do that without really breaking the card. But Pekka's used in a lot more than Pekka Bridge Spam and mid ladder, and I've played on played on my mini account for a series that I ended up dropping. I played a ton of Pekka, and it's almost as popular as like Mega Knight. I don't think it actually needs a buff. Pekka Bridge Spam definitely the most popular Pekka deck, but I feel like Pekka Bridge Spam is just a victim to the meta, and since cycle decks have been really strong in the past like year or so, like ever since the Pekka lost its 2-tower range, I think the meta's just been bad for the card. You see Anaban doing well with Pekka pretty much every season. Players can still have success with the card. I think it's just like a kind of a higher skill cap card to play now, especially with the decks that surround it. I don't think it really needs a buff though.
Okay, interesting. SK, do you have any thoughts on Pekka?
So I kind of agree with both sides in the sense that I don't think
the
Pekka.
fence, SK, ride the fence.
I think that Pekka does need a Pekka as a deck is suffering, but that, as Jack said, is because of the meta more so than Pekka itself. I mean, Rob is right that Pekka doesn't really counter much; it's just very expensive. But I think that again, that's because of the other cards. So, for example, you have Hunter, which again is something we've talked about. It's a card that just does so much damage. It does serve so many roles. So why would you need something like Pekka when you're already using such a powerful support card that can do so much DPS anyway? And also just Pekka doesn't counter much, which means that there are other cards you could use that would probably be more optimal in the meta. So I think that when Pekka does get a good meta, it'll be really scary for us, more so if it gets a buff. And you still see people like Carpi, especially. Carpi's kind of a different breed with Pekka. Like, no one really gets close to his skill level. I mean, Jax is pretty close, but other than that, it's kind of hard. And I think that it's just it's just that it's a very high skill cap card, and if you wanted to do well in the meta, you could easily just use a different option. So I think that Pekka could be addressed, but probably through the form of other cards, not necessarily Pekka itself.
Okay, man. Rob, do you have any final rebuttals on that?
No, I mean, you both bring up very good and kind of unarguable, like points that I can't really argue against. I just think that it might be fun for the game in a way to buff the Pekka and see what kind of happens.
Okay.
And that would probably have to be tapered with some other buffs as well, like buffing the counters to Pekka in response. So I don't know. I mean, if you guys don't agree with it, that's okay. Like I respect your opinions.
Okay, we'll see what the viewers say.
Yeah,
maybe some people would agree with you. Have your back in the comments below. So there we go. Lava Golem nerf, Pekka buff. Jax has recruits nerf, Lumberjack buff. SK, what about you, man? What's your buff or what's your nerf? Excuse me.
For my nerf, I'd like to say the Knight. So the Knight's kind of been rampant ever since 2020, I would say. More so when RG started becoming really meta, which is around, I'd say, I guess, March or so last year. It's honestly kind of crazy to say that 2020 was last year, but anyway, I think that Knight's just, it's 3 elixir. It has so much health. It gets so much value. You play it in the middle. Both Princess Towers target it. And for 3 elixir, you get so much value because you can kind of maximize other cards' value as well. So, like, say you have Knight and then a building like Bomb Tower or Tesla. The Knight can kind of just protect that building, and with so much HP, it can maximize the value of that building, which has less hit points. Plus, again, like I said, playing it in the middle gets more towers onto the cards, which, again, just maximizes the value of your overall defense. And I also think another point that's worth bringing up is that Knight is used in several cycle decks. It's even replaced Ice Golem in Expo, which always ran Ice Golem back in the day, so that's kind of crazy. But I think that the reason for this is because its insane value can be maximized as much as possible. Like, you cycle a lot of Knights and cycle cards, which means every single time you're getting that insane value from that one card.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of the actual value, I think that its hit points is the main issue. I think that it's a bit too high. Like, it can survive 2 Pekka hits. Jax would know very well about this. And it can also It can just kind of it can 1v1 a Mega Knight with I think skeletons as support, or maybe even just by itself. I'm not even sure,
By
but
itself.
it's
Yeah,
honestly
by
just
itself. If it's placed in the middle by itself. So.
yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. So I think that the way it needs to be addressed is back in 2019, I think February, it was given a 5% HP buff. So I think that this buff should be somewhat reverted, not fully, because the reason they buffed it in the first place was because it was needed. But I think maybe a 3% hit point nerf would be quite suitable for the knight, because I think it would kill that Pekka interaction. It would just kind of address all the points that I brought up earlier.
Well said, SK. You've got me as a believer, man. I sign off on that. Anybody disagree with a knight nerf?
No, but I do have a little bit of math to add. So if you don't like math, you can zone me out here. But I did like some HP to elixir. Like I just kind of added that up to similar options such as the Valk and the Ice Golem, and then I did their DPS. And the Knight offers more DPS than the Ice Golem, which doesn't do any, and a very very similar HP to elixir ratio. And then for the Valkyrie, its HP to elixir ratio is better, and its DPS is only slightly worse. So for those options, for one more than the Ice Golem and one less than the Valkyrie, it's literally outshining them in pretty much every way. And the Valkyrie's addition of the splash damage and the Ice Golem being able to kite, they just don't like. It's not worth it to use those when you can just use the Knight and just like overpower everything with its efficiency.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As someone who's been using Knight in basically every one of their main decks since like 3 years ago, I can tell you it's the strongest than it's ever been. It's never been this broken, in my opinion. And yeah, you guys have good points. I do agree that Knight is a bit too strong, and I kind of miss the days where Ice Golem was fun and you could kite troops and outplay people. Now you just put a Knight in the middle and it kills everything. So it's kind of ridiculous that that's a thing. So yeah, just nerf the Knight a little bit. Reverse that buff.
Yeah, I think that we all agree. Unbelievable, right?
Yeah,
I don't
that's crazy.
Yeah, I have like one of my like old school Clash friends. Shout out to Dan Perper. He always talks about like that the game opened up for him when he first realized the power of the Ice Golem kite, right? And how cool the Ice Golem and how effective the Ice Golem could be just kiting for 2 elixir and how much valuable that is. So it speaks a lot to the power of the Knight when you factor in that the Knight outshines Ice Golem for 1 elixir more. You don't see that much Ice Golem anymore, here and there, but it's pretty crazy. So SK, what's your buff, man?
All right, so I would love to say Expo, but I also would love to stay alive, so I'm definitely going to go with Furnace. And I think that it's kind of just a question of why was Furnace nerf late. So if I'm not mistaken, Furnace was kind of an issue like a while ago, maybe like 2 years ago at this time. And then what they did was they nerfed all. I think they introduced the Earthquake. I'm not.
All
You can correct me if
spawners,
I'm wrong,
yeah.
but I think that they introduced the Earthquake to counter spawners. I think Furnace was a really big issue at the time, but I feel like it was kind of okay. One thing is I agree with Rob what he said earlier, where we should just explore the option of just bolting cards for a while and see how the game does. I would love to see that with some cards, but for Furnace, I think that these spawners were later buffed. Like Goblin Hut got the Death Spear Gobs, and I think Barb Hut got it buffed or added, I'm not sure. But Furnace just doesn't have any Fire Spirits on Death, so I think a very easy buff is just add Fire Spirits on Death. I mean, it doesn't make too much sense why it doesn't when all the other spawners do, and it also kind of gets one-shot by almost any spell. So yeah, that's my reasoning behind the Furnace buff.
Interesting. How do you guys feel about that?
I agree with the Furnace buff, but I just want to be the voice of caution that we all know. We had a Goblin Hut meta that was super annoying because of the death spawn. We had a Barb Hut meta because of the death spawn. That was super annoying. I don't want to see that repeated with the Furnace. I think the death spawn is definitely one of the best additions to a building you can make for viability, because when you poison a Furnace, you can actually time the poison perfectly. The Furnace gets no value, but if it has that death spawn, it would get value. I think that's a good idea. I would just like maybe say nerfing its lifetime slightly or its HP slightly, along with adding the death spawn, just so that we don't have that meta where everybody's using the Furnace and now it's got a death spawn and it's got like the mini nukes, the fire spirits that are just splashing everything.
Mhm.
I think it's a card that should be buffed, but you have to be careful with it.
Rob?
Okay, I'm just gonna say, if you don't want to be hated for your buff, then you probably should have just picked Expo over Furnace, to be honest. But yeah, I would agree with I would agree with Jax and say that Furnace, while it's not so strong right now, and they could stand to be improved upon, you don't want to make it such an annoying card that it just rage quits people out of the game. Like they see a Furnace and they have to like lightning it, or they just like double tap swipe up and give up. So it's one of those cards where it could really ruin the experience of the game for a lot of players. But at the same time, it's pretty weak. So maybe even a rework of some sorts on all spawners could be applied here, just so we don't have those kind of annoying metas where you can't buff the spawner without just killing the entire meta as it is. But as a whole, the Furnace is pretty weak, and I don't necessarily agree with a death spawn buff, just because we've seen how that works. But maybe HP wise, or maybe something else that might prove to strengthen the card.
Yeah, I personally feel like Furnace, maybe give the Fire Spirits a little radius buff or something like that would affect the Furnace, because Fire Spirits is still like one of the worst cards in the game, if not the worst card in the game. But I agree with everything that Jax and Rob said in terms of like, it can be a very annoying card. I'd much rather see a buff to like Mother Witch, for example, because it's legendary and new and it kind of sucks. And it's kind of a spawner too. So, you know, I guess that's kind of a weird comparison, or maybe not, but yeah, I probably wouldn't want to see a buff to the Furnace personally. SK, how do you feel, man?
Okay, well, I think that you all have very valid points. So I would say that a pretty easy solution, because personally, when I play Expo and I just pretty much fireball every single Furnace and it instantly dies. So I think that it just doesn't get much value when placed for 4 elixir. So one way to kind of keep it the same without really while implementing my change is maybe like, because I also noticed that Furnace has a very high lifetime. I think 40 seconds or something, because I know it's higher than a Tesla. So I think that you could tone the lifetime down a bit to the point where one less wave of Fire Spirit spawn, and then you could add the Death Spirits. But I also wouldn't mind not seeing it buffed. It was just a card that I thought needed buff, but I do think overall for this kind of period, we need a lot more nerfs than buffs right now.
Okay, fair enough. I do like the idea that like every spawner now has death spawn except for Furnace, so it does feel like weird. So I could kind of buy into that idea personally, but I don't know, guys. Like viewers, again, what do you think of the Furnace idea? Do you think it's cool where it is? Needs a buff, nerf? Let me know in the comments below, guys. That is it. We covered a lot of cards. We talked about like the state of balance in the game, the freshness. I guess before we go, do you guys have any shout outs, SK?
Shout out to all of you viewers for watching the Broken Podcast, and shout out to Ash for making it, because personally, I actually used to love watching the Broken Podcast. It was just something that, because I enjoy kind of discussion type videos, so it's just something that I enjoyed watching. And I think that's another issue with the lack of balance changes. It's just there's not much to discuss, and that kind of makes the game even more stale in a way. So
For sure.
shout out to you, Ash, for making the Broken Podcast, and the viewers for watching it.
We love having you, SK. I appreciate that, man. Rob?
Yeah, shout out to my friend Parker the Boss, who you've had on the channel. You know
Yeah.
how good he is at his deck and really at the game.
A
He's
beast.
finished top 10 2 seasons in a row now with his niche lava deck, and that's really impressive. So he needs more recognition for that.
Dude, I need to get Parker back on. Good heads up
Yeah,
on that.
Huge props to
Great
Parker.
guess.
Yeah.
And also shout out to all the content creators on YouTube. Like the game is really stale and boring, but you guys are doing your best to really put out the best content you can, even though views are going down through no fault of your own. And I've seen that happening. I don't want to like call you out, ass, but it's happening too. And your content's better than ever. So
Oh,
it's not
golly,
your
I wouldn't
fault.
say
It's
that,
not
but thank
really
you.
any other
Yeah.
content creator's fault. Yeah,
Osama OP.
Yeah, for sure.
That's one of the best ever, dude.
It is
so
weird that like for me, it's just I've been in the game long enough to not the game Clash Royale, but the game of YouTube, that like you don't over celebrate when views are high, and you don't panic when views are down, because like there's always going to be tomorrow and next year or whatever, and things will look a lot differently. But it's cool because not me, but like a lot of other content creators right now, especially ones who kind of just were coming into their prime right when Clash started to decline. I definitely feel for those guys a bit, but you know, hopefully better days are ahead of us in the update. So good shout outs there, Rob. Jax, what about you, man?
Definitely got to give a shout out to my clan Clash Heads. I've been in there for a few months now and just have a super great environment, and the Pekka Royale server. Definitely a good space if you're trying to learn Pekka, and very friendly environment. And yeah, those are my shoutouts.
Fantastic. I will link that Discord server as well as all of my guests' Twitter information, their stats, and player profiles at clashroyale.com. Guys, thanks so much for coming on the channel. Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks so much.
Thanks
Thank you for having me.
No problem, guys. Thank you for watching all the way till the end. A big shout out to Bren Chong, my YouTube partner. Check out his information in the description below as well. Thank you again, as always. Take care, guys.